So we're going to break down what it is, and we are going to ask the scandalous question, even on the right, is it possible that Obergefell gets overturned in the next few years? What would have to happen for that to occur? Is there a high probability of that? And what is going on right now that is causing so many people to talk about that? Why are people saying right now that this could actually really happen, and what would it look like? So I recently saw a post on X that said, okay, the Supreme Court has officially been asked to take another look at Obergefell. That's kind of true, but that doesn't necessarily indicate some kind of decision is imminent. But we are in the beginning stages of people really unabashedly pushing for that. So Obergefell v. Hodges is the 2015 Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. And we'll say quote unquote, and I'll explain why in just a second. Nationwide in a 5-4 ruling, so very narrow decision, asserting that the 14th Amendment's due process and equal protection clauses grant same-sex couples the right to marry. These clauses, if you actually read the 14th Amendment, prohibit states from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and requires states to provide equal protection under the law to all persons. Now, the 14th Amendment is not coincidentally what the Supreme Court also used back in 1973 to decide Roe v. Wade. They said that somewhere in the penumbras of the 14th Amendment, there is this secret and hidden implied right to be able to kill your child. And it's pretty similar to the argument that's made here. We don't actually see a right for two men to get married in the 14th Amendment, but that is how the Supreme Court decided this just 10 years ago. Think about how much has changed in just 10 years since the Supreme Court made this decision. But now we've got a woman by the name of Kim Davis. You might, if you were paying attention to the news at the time, you might remember her. She is a former Kentucky county clerk, and she refused, after the Obergefell decision was published, to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. As you can imagine, this made some people mad. There was a gay couple in 2015 by the name of David Moore and David Ermold, and there should be an entire academic paper on how many gay couples share the same first name. I'm sorry. I know too many instances of that. I think that there's probably some psychoanalysis that could be done on that. As a result, she was actually jailed. Kim Davis was jailed for 5 days and fined $100,000 for emotional damages to these men because she, in accordance with her Christian faith, refused to sanctify something or sanction something that went against her faith, her sincerely held beliefs. She was also ordered to pay $260,000 in legal fees to the gay couple. So watch how quickly that happened. 2015, Obergefell is decided by the Supreme Court. That same year, a woman is placed in jail, charged hundreds of thousands of dollars because she said, no, I'm not going to go along with it in the state of Kentucky. Okay, so it should have been obvious then that this wasn't just about same-sex couples who wanted, hospital visitation rights. Similar thing was happening to Jack Phillips in the state of Colorado, but that story is, of course, even crazier. He just refused to bake a cake for the wedding of a couple who was, going through a marriage ceremony at the time. They could have found another baker. They decided to try to ruin Jack Phillips's life and sue him. And the state of Colorado, of course, obliged and said, he's got no right. This is discrimination. Eventually, after years and years and years of litigation and harassment by LGBTQ activists, his case made it to the Supreme Court, and in another narrow ruling, they said, he was treated with animus because of his Christian faith in the state of Colorado. So it should have been obvious at the time that this was going to be used, that the so-called gay marriage issue was going to be used as a mallet against Christians. as a way to say, yeah, sure, Christian, if you want to believe that, you can. If you want to preach that within the walls of your church, then okay, maybe. If you want to pray those prayers within the confines of your home, okay. But if you dare bring those beliefs into the public square, we will ruin you. And now, after years of this, Kim Davis is actually challenging these fees. She claims her First Amendment right to religious freedom shields her from liability. And she is arguing, along with her lawyers, of course. So she's taking up this case, appealing it to the Supreme Court, or she's trying to, argues that Obergefell was wrongly decided. And she is urging the Supreme Court to reverse it. And now, with a 6-3 conservative majority, as we'll get into in just a second, some conservatives like Katie Faust, like many of us on the natural marriage side, hope the court will overturn Obergefell. But certain justices, even conservative justices that we consider conservative, who are appointed by Donald Trump, may hesitate to take on a direct challenge. And there are some reasons for that. So let's be reasonable and balanced as we go through this issue. So Kim Davis, she is deciding that now is her time. Earlier this year, however, lower courts rejected her claims that her First Amendment right protects her from liability for refusing to issue a marriage license to the same-sex couple. A federal appeals court stated in March that the First Amendment does not protect her actions as a state official. So because this was part of her job, because the law said what it said, whether you agree with Obergefell or not, she was obligated to fulfill her job. That's what this particular court is arguing. And of course, her lawyers would say, look, you don't check your First Amendment rights. You don't check your right to religious expression when you walk into your profession. Davis's filing, however, says, quote, Obergefell was wrong when it was decided and is wrong today because it was grounded entirely on the legal fiction of substantive due process, implying, and again, if you listen to our Roe v. Wade or Doe v. Bolton or our Dobbs episodes, you'll remember us talking about this error of substantive due process. And Clarence Thomas, in his argument in favor of the decision of Dobbs, actually talks about this whole problem of substantive due process. So again, we see a lot of similarities between how Obergefell was decided and Roe v. Wade was decided. So her argument implies that the grounds for the ruling of the case are not constitutional and they're essentially made up. So according to the Constitution Center, substantive due process is protection under the 14th Amendment for rights that aren't explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, such as privacy, marriage, and bodily integrity. So it is entirely made up and implied, pulled out from some hidden place in the 14th Amendment. Davis previously appealed to the Supreme Court in 2019 to dismiss the damages suit, but the court declined. So even our conservative justices, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, noted that the case at the time did not fully address Obergefell's scope. So kind of saying, okay, you've got your issue, but that goes, you're not really addressing something that we as the Supreme Court are going to address. But Kim Davis's attorney, Matt Staver, believes that there is, quote, a good chance the Supreme Court will take up the case because 3 of the 4 justices who dissented in Obergefell are still on the court. And then, of course, and that's Thomas, Roberts, and Samuel Alito. And now, of course, we've got new picks on the court like Amy Coney Barrett. And we've also got Gorsuch, and we've also got Kavanaugh. And so they're saying the chance is much better than it was in previous years.